Good afternoon. After some of the interventions will be in English, others in Arabic. So if you need to use translation, please go ahead and take your headset. The afternoon session focuses on Area C, Jordan Valley, about backgrounds and facts. There will be 4 presentations. The first will be by Aysar Tome, who is about the demographic and economic and environmental situation in the zones classified as entirely Area C. Yasser Tome is a researcher at the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. Yasser, you have the floor. Nafir Masad will present the introduction to this paper. So Nafir and Aysar Tome. Good afternoon to you all. My name is Nafir Masad. I work in the maps and GIS at the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. Today, we wish to speak about the reality or situation of the areas classified entirely as Area C in figures and facts. First, we will present the methodology in identifying these clusters, because everybody speaks about 61% of the area of the West Bank are in Area C. We wish to shed light on the areas that are entirely located in the Israeli-controlled Area C. The methodology we adopted in demarcating these clusters was by using shape files of the residential zones classified by BCBS for the year 2017, and we relied on the negotiations affairs department for the shapefile for the classifications under Oslo. To locate the settlements, we relied on data from Arish for Applied Research Center, because they were our partners in the 2017 population census, and we updated in collaboration with them the limits of the settlements so that they do not include the areas under Palestinian areas would not include buildings within the settlements. First, we worked on the clusters or zones. For 2016, it was referenced by a national committee that identified codes and names of these different zones and demarcated the boundaries of these zones using satellite pictures, and we relied on the boundaries of land settlement, master plans, and statistical boundaries in certain cases, and the boundaries set by the Central Election Commission. All of the shapefiles were adapted according to a specific methodology to demarcate the different boundaries of these clusters. We did a space crossing between the clusters, which are the limits of the Palestinian controlled area for the 2017, and the classifications under Oslo Accord. It appeared 96 residential zone, and here, according to PCPS, It is the area permanently populated, whether it has an officially recognized administrative structure or it is a segregated residential zone, but it is under the administrative authority of another organ. So this is the definition of the residential zone that we relied on in demarcating the borders and in classifying according to the Oslo classifications. The 96 residential zones do not include the area of Jerusalem behind the checkpoints, which is colored here in gray. The beyond the checkpoints, Jerusalem, which we call J1 area, which is the part of Jerusalem which was forcefully annexed by Israel in 1967. So we focused on the marginalized areas which are located in the West Bank with the exception of G1. The second pillar of our work, in addition to the shapefiles, was the database of the population, establishments, and housing census. It was a huge database and it was a building level geographic base. So each building had coordinates defined and data collected in the census questionnaire. We relied on these two sets of data in extracting the results of the case study we are working on the Palestinian clusters in Area C in the Jordan Valley. The total area of the West Bank in our shapefiles is 5,660 square kilometer. The clusters we classified as entirely C represented about 12% of the total area of the West Bank. These clusters were distributed and varied in number between one governorate to another. According to governorate, in Jenin governorate, we had 20 residential clusters that are entirely in the Israeli-controlled Area C. In Tubas, 10 clusters. Tulkarem, 2 clusters only. In Nablus, 6, and in Qalqilia, 8. Salfit had 1, which is Izbit Abu Adam. I say 1. Salfit had so many clusters under Area C, but they're partly in Area C. But here we focus only on the areas that are totally in Area C. So Izbit Adam was in entirely Area C. In Ramallah, it was the Bedouins of Al Marajat, which is one area. But Ariha and Northern Jordan Valley had the largest area, but not the most numbers. So the total area of the totally Area C in Gaza Strip was 5% of the total Area C. Jerusalem, with the exception of J1, had 4 clusters that are fully in Area C. Clusters in Bethlehem were 8. Hebron had the largest number of clusters, which are entirely Area C, and they amounted to 32 clusters, which represents about 27% of the total residential areas of Jerusalem as a governorate. In the governorate of Hebron, there are 127 clusters. The clusters in totally Area C were about 32 of the clusters of Hebron. The settlements, as we mentioned in the beginning, were from the shapefiles of Arish Applied Research Center. The total number of settlements in the clusters in totally in Area C was 26 with 10,000 settlers. 26% of these settlements are located in the governorate of Jericho and Jordan Valley. 12 settlements. The settlements are colored in red. The orange color is the areas that is totally in Area C. We come to the census data, or the data which we matched with the clusters that are entirely in Area C. The population was 34,026, being 17 something thousand for male and 16,000 for male. The total number of population clusters in total area C was 1.2 of the residential clusters of the West Bank. The highest number of population was in the camp of Kalandia with 7,826, and Jeftlek and Jericho and Northern Valley with 3,100 population. Population density 50 individuals per square kilometer in the clusters located entirely in area C, whereas in the West Bank it was 10 individuals per square kilometer, and in the Gaza Strip it is not even comparable. It's 5,204 individuals per square kilometer. The characteristics enrollment in education, there wasn't a lot of difference between the areas C and West Bank. In the West Bank it was 34.6, and in the Gaza Strip it was 36.2. Number of people with higher school diploma and above was 5,560 people, 2,600 for male, 2,900 for female. Illiteracy rates varied a lot between the West Bank and the area classified entirely as Area C. In the area classified as C, it was 8.2, but in the West Bank, it was 3.6. Through the GIS and the buildings database that was updated in 2017, we used the buffer tool, and we identify the distance at 1 kilometer based on the recommendations of the sustainable development. Is that the nearest educational or health center or any utility center should not be further than 1 kilometer from the area. So we identified the buildings located at more than 1 kilometer from the educational or health centers. And the result was that about 50% of the clusters located entirely in Area C are at more than 1 kilometer from health centers and dental care centers. And 27%, or about 28% of the buildings, we speak here of populated buildings with households. So we speak of the households residing in these buildings. We speak of the percentage of households. 50% of the households living in buildings that are at a distance of more than 1 kilometer from the health center or dental care center. And 27.7% of the family or households live at more than 1 kilometer from the nearest educational establishment. 26.3% of the households live at more than 1 kilometer from educational and health centers and dental care centers, all of type of centers. Regarding the labor characteristics, participation in the labor force of the working age, individuals at working age, which is 15 years and above, the total participation in the labor force was 43.7%, being 75.3% for male and 11.3% for female. The unemployment for young graduate, that is between 17 to 29 years, the highest was among female graduates, which was 40.6%. The place of work, 19.7% of workers work in Israel and the settlements. This was the maps and the GIS in correlating indicators for the Area C clusters. ISER will speak of the environmental indicators, and this will be the continuation of the study. So he will be speaking of the environment in these clusters.
Good afternoon. My name is Aysar Tome. I work in the environmental statistics at the PCBS. In continuing with the statistics as started by Nafir Massad concerning the census, we had 6,468 completed structures. All I'm just referring only to C, to area C, so I'm not referring to anymore else. Out of these structures or buildings, 1.5 they constitute out of the completed buildings in the West Bank. The highest number was in Qalandia. It was 1,000 buildings. At the structures, we had 529 structures working in area C. Most of these structures focus on wholesale and retail businesses, and also resident essential houses, 5,556. That constitutes 1.1 of the housing in the houses in the West Bank. Also in housing, we had around 33% as flats, 43% as houses. The villas is 0.8%, whereas the ambiguous figure that requires more light, where we had 23% were vulnerable houses, which is just one independent room or a shack or a tent. 80% of the families, they owned their houses, and 19 they lived in rented houses, and 1% only were families living for free of charge or against their work. Intensity of residence, that is the number of individuals in per room, it was 1.4 in area C, whereas in the West Bank it was 1.3. 6% of the households lived in density of 3 individuals or more. The average number of rooms, it was 3.1, of which 63% of the families, they live in houses that have 3 rooms. Unsafe drinking water. Around 13% of the households live in houses, connected houses, that get water from unsafe sources. Unsafe sources here we are referring to unprotected springs or tanks or wells. Compared to the West Bank, it was 4.9 or around 5%. So this figure requires more attention. The issue of improved sewage system, there were around 95% of the households, they have improved sewage. According to sustainable development, improved sewage is that when there is a building or a house should be connected to a sewage system underground. Around 57% of the families, they are connected to septs, and we know that this affects the underground water. And getting rid of household garbage, around 57% they get rid of the garbage by simply dumping them, whereas the figure that is needed is around 41%. They simply burn their garbage. Maybe containers are not closed or whatever, and some of them are simply throw them randomly. These figures require more attention in order to focus on this area. Thank you. Thank you, Aysar. Thank you. And we expect the the Central Bureau of Statistics to give us more details to compare them with the latest statistics to see the change, how they are. Thanks a lot. Now we continue with Rawia Alaouni, the current situation in the Valley area in 2017. Rawia also is a researcher at the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics. I'll speak today about the current situation in the Valley area in 2017. I will focus on the residents in the Valley area and from demographic, economic, and social perspectives, and also the health situation, education, work, also their housing, and also the structures and buildings based on the 2017 census, and to compare that with the 2007 census, and compare that with the West Bank in order to see the living standards in the Valley area. The study included 27 communities in the Valley area. They were selected based on OCHA figures, starting from Tubas and northern valleys, Bardala, Ain al-Bayda, Kardala, خربة الحلميزيق, الفارسية, أنا العقبة communities, المالح, خربة الراس الأحمر, and عطوف, أنا الحديدية communities, طوباس, نابلس, عين شبلي, and فروش بيت دجان, طانا, طويلة, تل خشبي, and رام الله, and البيري, معرجات, Bedouins, and ending with Jericho, مرج ناجي, زبيدات, مرج الغزال, جفتلك, فصائل, العوجة, and النوعمي, and عين ديوك الفوقة, and عقبة جبر كام النبي موسى communities. Here's the map that shows the communities. The number of residents in the Valley area according to the 2017 census was 28,433 people, where it was 24,135 in 2007, with an increased percentage of 17.8%. To compare between the residents based on gender in Valley area, 104 males for each female. In the West Bank, 104. Valley area, 103. Gender ratio constitute 1% out of the 2,800,000. It's not all of Jericho, it's just the Bedouins. The classification of residents of the Valley area as A, B, and C, 46% they inhabit the A area, and the remaining 33% is live in the C area, and the rest are in B area. The age composition or distribution, we have 48% are children from 0 to 17 years, youth until 27 years. I missed that. Adults 30 to 59, around 26%. Old people around 4%. Generally, we notice that the community is young in the Valley area. The refuge status, around 56% of the Palestinian residents in the Valley area are refugees. Compared to the previous census, they were 12,376, now 15,544 refugees. Number of households are 5,364 households, with a size of the household 5.3 individuals, compared to the West Bank, where the size of the household was 4.8 for each household. So the previous census, it was 6 individuals per household. Looking at the marital status, 67% above 17 years of age are married in the Valley area, and 24 are never married before. The age average among the females is 17 years. Same thing for the West Bank. Whereas for the males, the age, it was 24 in the Valley area, whereas in the West Bank it was 25 years. Compared to the previous census of 2007, we noticed that the number for females was 14 and for males was 23 years. Health situation. Sorry, I missed that. We have indications about the loss of weight and malnutrition. This was taken from the multi-indicator census. We have 6% of children below the age of 5 years. They suffer underweight issues, and compared to the West Bank, which is 1.5%. Malnutrition, we have 20%. They suffer, whereas in the West Bank, 7.7. 14% of children below the age of 5, they suffer overweight, whereas around 10% in the West Bank, they suffer that. 3% of the children are below it or underweight, compared to 1.7 in the West Bank. Suffering stunting, and 83% of the Palestinian population are covered by health insurance, compared to the West Bank, which is 66%. 2017 figures. Education and work. The 18.6% they didn't receive any education, whereas in the West Bank it is 3.1%.
Gender illiteracy rate among male in 2007 it was 6.4 and it dropped to 3. For female gender illiteracy it was 16 and it dropped to 10. Rate about 6% of the Palestinian population aged 10 and above in the Jordan Valley area have a BA and higher. And this is a low rate compared to the West Bank, where it was 14.1%. But the rate in the Jordan Valley is improved compared to 2007, when it used to be about 3% for those with a BA or higher. We speak of unemployment rates. 7.8% of the Palestinian population in the Jordan Valley area of 15 years and above are unemployed, compared to the West Bank, where the rate was about 13.2%, while in the general census for 2017, the rate was 8.1%. Now we speak of housing conditions. The number of populated residential housing in the Jordan Valley was 5,364 housings. The type of housing is mostly a house with 71%, followed by apartment 11%, and then type of barracks or caravan about 10%. The average housing density in the Jordan Valley was 1.7 individuals per room, whereas in the West Bank it's 1.3 individuals per room. And compared to the previous census of 2007, it was 2.1 individuals per room. 83% of households in the Jordan Valley area use safe water source, whereas 35% in the West Bank use safe water source. We have about 89% of the housings in the Jordan Valley area are connected to the electricity grid, but in the West Bank is 93.6% of housings. About 95% of households in the Jordan Valley use improved wastewater systems, compared to the West Bank, where it's 69.9%. Buildings and establishments. The number of buildings in the Jordan Valley area in 2004 was 4,000 buildings to reach 5,500 in 2017. 554 establishments in the Jordan Valley. 99% of them are operating. Thank you. Thank you, Rawia. And to you all, we are very enthusiastic that we received this data, because comparing to the data of between 2007 and 1997 and 2017, because what I understood is the population demographic increase in 1.7% in Area C, but in the West Bank it's 3%. So it is very clear that there is a change in the patterns of demographic growth, and it is deteriorating. And this will be an important factor. The other point is the disability rate is 1.6 compared to 1.8 in the West Bank. So probably those who are disabled die at younger ages. So there are so many things we can think about. When are you going to share these demographic data? They said next year. We can't wait to use the data. Now we give the floor to Dr. Salwa Masad, Hadil Darour, and et al., who will speak of the reasons and prevalence of malnutrition and intestinal infections among children and their mothers in Jordan Valley. Salwa Masad is Director of Research in the Palestinian National Public Health Institute. She has a PhD in population health, demographic health from Wisconsin University in the US. Salwa, you have 20 minutes. Good afternoon. Today we'll be speaking of factors related to malnutrition in the Jordan Valley area. The background, instead of saying it, let's watch the video. The video was made by the Institute as a background on the Jordan Valley area.
سلاح الأرض ونحن أصحاب الأرض محرومين منها. لما نروح على المدرسة، لما نروح نتعب، لما نرجع نتعب، كنا في الإشتاء يقدرش يفوت الباب، الواحد بيضلك في نفسه ما بيقدرش يطلع، فإحنا بيجي تركتر بيجيبنا بيروح يودينا، فنتوحل أواعينا بتوحل نتوسخ، لما نفوت على المدرسة البنات بيستفزونا. المدير تقابلنا مرات بتعاقبنا، تروح علينا أمرار بروح علينا امتحان أول حصة، أمرار بروح عنا درس، وإحنا من حقنا إنه يكون في حدنا مدرسة قريب ونهتم بدروسنا. المستوطن يتمتع في جميع نواحي الحياة، من باصات، من شوارع، من عيادات، من جميع، حتى برة سمك، برة سباحة، ولكن الخوف وحصل ورواتب كأنه في صحراء قاعدة. أنا طالب للمواطن الفلسطيني وأنا منه أن نعيش حياة كريمة، نعلم أطفالنا ونعيش بحريتنا ونستغل جميع مدخراتنا.
Now we come back to the study about the spread of malnutrition in Jordan Valley area, and I don't need to talk more about the Jordan Valley and the challenges it faces. So the purpose of the study was to assess the spread of malnutrition for children between 1 to 12 years and their mothers. Why did we conduct this study? Because the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics and the Ministry of Health, we have figures about the spread of malnutrition in Palestine in general. We have the spread of malnutrition, for example, in the Jericho area, Tubas, Nablus, but we don't have figures about malnutrition in the Jordan Valley. So this was the first time we get statistics relevant to the Jordan Valley as an entity and not the West Bank as a whole. The method was in collaboration with the PCPC. By the end of 2017, we conducted a cluster study, and we received from OCHA all of the localities in the Jordan Valley. We provided the PCPS with the localities, and they selected a random sample with 26 localities, and out of the 26, we selected randomly the households, all three households. We went to the household using the maps provided to us by the PCPS, and we took all of the children aged 1 to 12 years and their mothers. Every mother filled in 2 questionnaires, one about her child and one about her, about the demography and socioeconomic status of the household, and then we measured the height and weight of every child 3 times, and height and weight and waist for the mother, and we took a blood sample to assess anemia for mothers and children, and we took 2 stool sample from every study for every mother and child. I can tell you that this study smelled because we have 4,000 children, so 3,000 stool samples and about 5,000 stool samples were tested. And the Ministry of Health was screaming, "Come and smell!" The ministry is smells nasty, but the test should have been done with a fresh sample. So every time a child goes to the do some stool, the nurse comes to take the sample directly to the lab so that it can be tested and see the bacteria. The bacteria is still living. So we had this struggle to have a fresh stool that comes on time to the lab. So this is a picture from the field. The team was the Ministry of Health and the lab technicians and nurses from the Ministry of Health with supervisors who were trained at PCPS to read the maps. So they were our guides to the households. And you see here they take the measuring board we used to measure the height. And here it was the nurse. She was a hero. Any child who was unable to go to the bathroom to give a sample, she would stay at home until she has a sample. She was persistent to have a high response for stool testing. So she would leave them a sterilized cup so that they can take the stool sample. And here in the field, this is the lab technician who took a blood sample. And then they take the sample and go to the nearest lab to test it. We have 587 households that were randomly selected from the Jordan Valley area. 61% of them lived in villages, 28% in the camp, and 10% in the Bedouin communities. These are the number of households distributed between Tubas, Nablus, and Jericho, and the large number of households reflects the number of households in every locality between Tubas. The household size was between 5 to 6 members per household, and we asked them about the health services they were using. 73% went to the ministry centers and 20% to UNRWA centers. According to the income reported in the study, 77% live below poverty line, and according to PCPs, it means that their monthly income is below 2,000 shekels. 65% of mothers did not complete their secondary education, and we were astonished to see this low level of educational attainment. We cannot speak of nutrition in Jordan Valley without asking about exposure to political violence. 10% reported that they were displaced from their areas by the Israeli occupation, and they are under threat of further displacement. 10% reported that their house was demolished by the Israeli settlements. Abu Saqr is a well-known figure. His house was demolished 10 times. They demolish and he reconstructs. And the 12% are under threat of house demolition by the Israelis. For children, we tested the parasitic infection and we found, I have to remind you that we conducted a study in December and January, that is in cold weather. And usually in cold weather, infection, parasite infection is less likely. So 60% of them had infection, mostly by Giardia and Amebia. Stunting, we had about 16% of children below 5 were stunned. According to the mixed study by PCBS, it was 7%, so more than double the national average. And this reflects chronic malnutrition. Stunting is caused by chronic malnutrition. To say that it is stunting. We also list the differences in stunting between urban, rural, and camp areas. It was most common among the Bedouins because it reflects their food insecurity, poverty, and malnutrition. We also looked at the wasting and underweight, and we had wasting 1.7%. According to Mix 2015, it was 0.4%, and underweight was 2.8% for children below 5 years old. When we addressed the factors related to underweight among children, we said that children with disability are more likely to be malnutritioned and underweight, and the lower education of the mother also was related to underweight among the children. We also looked at overweight because underweight and overweight are called malnutrition. So we had for children below 5, 12.1% of children are overweight and obese, whereas according to Mix it was 8%. So it's higher than the national average, although we did not expect that obesity and overweight will be higher than the national level. And the reason is what we call food nutrition paradox, is how can we have food insecurity and poverty and insufficient food, so mothers cannot provide their children with the nutritional food, so they go to empty calories, so it's junk food, so we have higher obesity. We also examined the factors related to obesity and overweight among the children. The older the child is, the more likely he or she is to be overweight. If the mother is overweight, it is more likely that the children will be also overweight, and if they live in the camp. And it was not the first time. There was a previous study about mothers living in refugee camps, and the percentage of obesity among these mothers was higher than the national level. When we studied for anemia, 57%. So 1 of every 2 children has anemia for children below 5. According to Mix, the national average was 23%. So it's more than the double of the national average. And for the older children above 5 years old, it was 48%. This alone is a very important indicator for policy making. We asked mothers if the child has anemia, and we compared what the mother said with what the test results showed. Less than 5 years old, 15% of mothers said that they have anemia, and they had anemia. But actually it was 57%. So we have about 40% of children with anemia. Their mothers are not aware that they have anemia. And here we speak of access to services. For age 5 years old, only 7% of children with anemia were reported by their mothers, but the number in the sample was 7%. So if we did not conduct the study and took the blood set, we would have said only 7% of the children have anemia. But because we did the blood set, it was 47% of children with anemia. So people here may say the problem is awareness, and we must explain to the mother, no, it's not only a problem of awareness. And I have to reiterate that when we went to conduct the study, all of the mothers in the area came in masses and said, please take a blood test, please take his weight and weight. It's an opportunity that you came here. So the mothers are aware of the importance of these tests and nutritional tests, but it was a problem of access to services, to health services. The factors associated with anemia, if the maternal anemia leads more probably to children anemia living in Jericho compared to Tubas and Nablus and living in the Bedouin communities. We also studied mothers and children. The purpose of the study was children, but since we studied children, we studied also the maternal, the maternal malnutrition. We asked the mothers, and they said about 90% said that they had anemia. So if we asked the mother alone, we would have said that the prevalence of anemia among mothers in the Jordan Valley is 90%, but based on the blood test, 58% had anemia. So see how many mothers have anemia and they're not aware of it. And we know the repercussions of anemia on mother's health and her quality of life, and when they have children, on the outcome of pregnancy and on younger children and their health. And among pregnant women, 71% of pregnant women suffered from anemia, and these are tough repercussions on their life and the life of their children. In Palestine, according to UNICEF Food Security Survey, it was 30% prevalence of anemia among pregnant women, but in our study, it was 71% for women in Jordan Valley. About 74% of mothers had overweight and obesity, and 40% had obesity. So this is serious with metabolic syndrome. So the mother are more likely to have cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and high blood pressure. The central obesity are one of the more important factors to assess the metabolic syndrome and the non-communicable diseases. About 16% of mothers had a waistline of more than 84 centimeters, and for amebia it was 6.7%. The double burden of malnutrition, where we have at an individual level to have on the one hand malnutrition and on the other hand obesity. How can this happen? We found that a child is stunted but in the same time obese, 2% of children. A child has anemia and in the same time they are obese, 5% of children. Mothers with anemia and in the same time obesity, 44% of mothers in the study. At the household level, we found that 8% of the households, children are stunted and mothers are obese. 6% of households, the child is obese and the mother is anemic. And 37% children are anemic and mothers are overweight. When we speak of study recommendations, it's to say that we have to distribute vegetables in the Jordan Valley. We have to speak of political solutions because this is the de facto situation, and the political solution will be a solution to all of these problems. But this only God can solve it. So we have to advocate for human rights and that people are entitled to decent life, and that all of the institutions responsible at the national level must collaborate to solve the root causes of malnutrition. What are the root causes of malnutrition? And not to give flour everyone and then, but also we have to help them access clean drinking water and to solve the problem of poverty and food insecurity in the Jordan Valley. It is very important to reiterate the education of mothers because everything related to life and health and other aspects of household life are related to the level of education of mothers. And when we speak of solving the problem of children malnutrition, we have to solve the problem of maternal malnutrition, and we have to see what are the health services available and how we can collaborate together and help this population access health services. The new thing is done for family health care and health insurance, so that we can have family medicine where a doctor is responsible for treating all of the household members, and therefore they can do follow-up and see if there is up-to-date responses, and they can do a lifestyle approach to treatment. And these are the heroes who conducted the study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salwa. You just finished in less time. This is a great study. This is not something easy to do. In the past, I used to do something that has to do with the height and weight and stool analysis. Once I brought a stool from abroad to Ben Gurion Airport, and it's not an easy thing to do, yes. I needed something for microscopic examination, and this is a great effort that you could achieve this. This is important, but I would like to make 2 points. Exactly what, as you said, that obesity is an indication of poverty. People, they become fat, and so they have empty calories or less nutritional value. So obesity is related to poverty, not only here, but in many third world countries. The issue, yes, it is political, but also it's related to an important issue, which is poverty, and not only access to clinic. It's not important to access clinic if you don't have poverty, if you have good nutrition, if you have good access to access to good water. So yes, political situation is very difficult to change, but it's important to be able to work on how to alleviate this poverty. Thank you. Then, last intervention from Ahmed Hnaiti. The popular resistance forms steadfastness. Ahmed has a BA in sociology, and he has published several studies about the Bedouin community, and he is working as a researcher in public health at Beale City University. Always we look at the valley area as homogeneous area, although and is considered as homogeneous area, as if it is a homogeneous community in terms of adaptation mechanisms, social and economic structures. But if we study these Palestinian communities, we discover that there are differences, sometimes major differences, which is attributed to their living style, which is, it's a herding community, and the Israeli policies are different, and the communities that depend on agriculture, the distribution is different according to the ownership of land and water. And there are differences in these villages, how the ownership is distributed, ownership of land and water. And so this creates differences in the economic and social structures within these villages, and so the adaptation mechanisms and steadfastness as well. I'll speak about 3 villages, which is Bardala in Tobas area, and Al Jiftlik in Jericho area. It's part of the central valleys, and the Fasail village, which is not far away from Jiftlik area. I believe they have differences in social and economic structures due to the distribution, differences in the distribution of ownership of land. As to Bardala has one clan, which is Sawafta clan or family, and the land is owned by exclusively by this family. And the 60s, they dug a well for all of their family for agricultural use. Then they had agreement with the Israelis to close that well and to get equal quantity of water and the same cost, and they had that agreement with the Israelis. Since then, they have been getting water from the Israeli Mekorot water company. And so this constituted sustainability in spite of the scarcity of water they are getting, as the Israelis say. But the water they are getting continued good for agriculture, and it's not saline, and this created adaptability mechanism. The other part in Bardala, they have implicit agreement within the village that no one will benefit from agriculture there other than the family members. So an agriculture without water, then you will not benefit from that. So there will be no feasibility. So they had that agreement within the clan that no one other than family members will be allowed to access water for agricultural use, as being an exclusive right for the family members, Sawafta family. And this resulted that this served as repellent to any investors coming to invest in Bardala, and this was limited, even non-existent. And so this has affected the social structure within the village, where the Bardala people, they maintained the exclusive use of land and utilization of land, and they control the distribution of land within the village. This resulted and because of the drought and the increased population, they agreed they have social cohesion and agreement, although they have their own issues, internal issues, but in facing external risks, they are very united. Now, part of the adaptation mechanisms in Bardala they are using to keep their existence, that water will not be given for agricultural use by non-family members. Number two, the Israeli water pipes pumping from their own wells are under their land, and so they would dig 1 meter, they can get water. They simply dig holes in the Israeli pipes and get water. And so the Israelis now give them around 120 cubic meters per hour, but they get their own way around more than 200 cubic meters. And this allowed them to continue with their agricultural activity and to increase the irrigated land and any tendency or if they have any external issue, they will cooperate together. Like, for instance, the Israelis came when they were looking for these holes. They destroyed part of the agricultural pipes. Within 1 day, they installed their pipe networks without waiting for the government to compensate them. This is the way how they act when dealing with the government and other organizations. Also, once the electrical transformer was burned down, but within 2 days they collected the money collectively and they substituted that. They said, we cannot wait for the government or anyone to help us, so we need to rely on ourselves. So they decided to collect the money on their own and took the initiative. As for Jiftlik, it is an agricultural land owned by families that do not live in the village anymore. So there is an ownership of water and land individually that they can sell and transfer. And so some external farmers, they joined the village, came in, and some refugees who were in Abu al-Ajaj, that was destroyed in 1967. They moved to Al-Jiftlik, so they became part of the residents there. And so the community was more of a mosaic one, with not a single family in control. And so this resulted, or the water wells they are using are their own well, around 30 wells now. It's around, I think, 18. And water they are pumping is not enough. It's saline. This has resulted in change in their agricultural strategies. Many of them are moving to planting palm trees and to adapt to the saline water they are getting. And so this has created the Gift residents to being a mosaic one with external investments due to the investment in palm trees and also the increase in the land or real estate, and so in the land prices, and some people from outside the village coming to invest there. Large number of them who people who come to for agricultural activities. So there is no cohesion or unity within this community. So it's more of a mosaic community. And when they had their electricity transformer burned down, they waited for more than 20 days without electricity supply, waiting for the government to replace it for them. Al-Gift is agricultural land owned by a family from Nablus called An-Nimr family. They own around 300 dunams owned by Fahmi An-Nimr. So there is no agricultural land. The other residents, in 1948, there was a refugee camp in Fasail. In 1967, the refugee camp left to Jordan. They were displaced. Families from Beit Lahem, Al-Ta'amri, Al-Rashidi, and others, they joined in. And they depended on herding. The relations between the between the residents and the land which they don't own was not that strong, because out of 3,300 dunams of agricultural land, only 500 dunams are being invested in agriculture. This is as a result of the use of land within the village. We are speaking about Fasail village, Fasail Fouq and Fasail Tahta, lower and upper Fasail. The families there, they used to have herds, but this doesn't exist anymore. It's in Fasail Central and Upper Fasail. This is due to the increase of the animal feed and Israelis. So people are giving up their herds, which is targeted a lot more than the targeting of the agricultural produce, due to the issues mentioned by Abdurrahman in the morning session. So here we are speaking about a large part of the village. They work in the Israeli settlements. Now all of this, if you want to speak about, we'll speak about the valley area as something homogeneous. But the size of these villages is higher than that of the West Bank, like Bardala is 5, Jiflik 5.5, and Fasail 5.2. Unemployment is very high between one village to another. In the West Bank, it's 13%. Al Jiflik, it's 6. And Fasail, 4.6. Bardala is 3.10% of unemployment. And here there are questions, like how much of, or how many of the people who receive education stay in the village. So this might be related to education, and so this community could be that is uneducated society. And so there are more questions than answers here. And here we'll speak about education in the West Bank. Like in the West Bank, who has diploma is 18.5, but in Badr it's 9%. And in Jiflik, it's around 3%. And so most of the youths who find job opportunities, they try to look for jobs outside agriculture. So many times they go to work in the Israeli settlements, and this has to do with the population increase, because in the valley area it's not homogeneous. Like Bardala and Jiflik, we notice an increase, 16.5% increase. In Bardala, it's there is a decline by 2.5%, and in Fasayr 36%. As if the surplus in agricultural work, many of them, or few of them, they get jobs in organizations, but the majority of them, they go to work in the Israeli settlements. So this makes us ask the question on to ask about the policies, because the area C is not only one, or valley area is not only one area, so strategies and plans must be devised accordingly. I studied the Bardala area and I noticed they had their own conflicts, that's how they look at themselves. They have their own conflicts with the authority. Until now, the mayor of the village is not from the village, so they are refusing to make a village council. So here is a contradiction between applying policies of the government and how to meet their needs. Until now, they are not cooperating. There are many issues related to the local council, and they look upon they are hostile. They have a hostile view of the government policies. I had a discussion with one of the residents during the Israeli campaign against their water networks. He was accusing the Palestinian Authority of being of inciting Israelis against them. So this is how they consider their existence or presence and the organizations that support them. So the valley area, there are two issues that make people continue living there. The basic thing is that the surplus of labor force, they go to the Israeli settlements where they get job opportunities. And the second thing, that people do not pay their dues for water bills. So if they were to be asked to pay for water bills, if these CSO say we are unable to provide support to you, don't. And so they are not paying these water dues. And here we'll speak about the valley area as agricultural area. So a lot of money is being paid for water. It's a hot area. You cannot live without air conditions. So air conditions are running all the time, and with high prices of electricity. And so if they need to pay their dues for electricity and water, this will be a lot of money. And the scarcity of support for agricultural investment in the valley area, where they try to adapt themselves within these two issues. And this is the basic thing. There are several other issues, but basically this is that makes people, or part of them, remain resilient in that area. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed. Ahmed's intervention explains the causes for the deterioration of the situation there. This is a multi-speciality session. I would like to thank the Palestinian Institute, or the Institute for Palestinian Studies, that brought together all this health, social, economic issues, because many times the issue in the health issue is separated from all other issues, although it is a social component, and it is deeply connected to the social economic context. People, they don't live in on islands, it's a community. So we open the floor now for discussion. Sabine.
Thank you for this very rich session in providing statistical data and analysis. I have a few questions and comments regarding the contribution by Mr. Ahmed Hneti. It seems that the question of labor has variances between one area and another compared to Bardala and the other areas covered by the study. And it appears that you have mentioned that this variance is linked to being able to work in the settlements. Have I understood you correctly or not? Second, the settlements are close to all of these areas. So how do you explain the variance if the detrimental factor is closeness or farness from the settlements? You cannot travel for over half an hour or a quarter an hour to reach a settlement in these areas. The question mark to the lady to my farthest right. Can you explain the correlation between being close to Jericho and anemia? What is there in Jericho that causes anemia? And second, regarding the team from the PCBS, the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics, can you explain the credibility of demographic data on Jordan Valley compared to the West Bank? I know that there is a tight siege upon the Jordan Valley that make people lie when giving statistical data or responding to questionnaires. So how do you address the question of quality of data and the credibility compared to the rest of the West Bank? Do you have a filtering system to cleanse the data and to ensure credibility and validation of data? We will take several questions and then we will answer all the questions together because there's Munir here who wishes to ask a question. Thank you for the presentations, very rich presentations. A quick remark, I believe that the papers from the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics will be available and published. So you will have it on the site. And it is possible that we publish it as part of the proceedings of the conference. But I have a clarification question about a notion you used in the first paper about the localities that are classified being entirely in Area C, as if there are cross-cutting localities that are not entirely in Area C. Please explain this concept. This is the question. I have another question to Ahmad. Please explain more the last or the conclusion of your paper, that there are the factors of steadfastness that are paradoxical negative steadfastness about working in settlements. Do we have statistics that support the rate of labor in the settlements? And this question will be addressed further in sessions tomorrow. Lack of payment of electricity and water bills. I didn't understand your point here. Please elaborate. With all thanks due to the Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics for the data presented, I was hoping to have a time chain They compared with the West Bank, but they did not compare the same area with previous years, so that we can measure the progress in every indicator across time. The second point, the last paper or presentation by Mr. Ahmad shows that it is not enough to gather statistics. It is also paramount to analyze the data. The three representatives of PCBS presented us with data, but without any analysis, and therefore it is important to have a fourth paper that analyzes the data and gives us a global description of the situation, especially relating to economic indicators and their correlation to social indicators, as was done by the lady on the health aspects, and as was done by Mr. Ahmad when he addressed the three different localities and the variances between them. The paper presented by Ahmad confirms what I said in the morning, that it is not enough to speak of general things. We must elaborate on the details because there are subtle variances between one area to another in terms of needs and in the same time in terms of possibilities and the requirements for development varies from one area to another. We will take answers. We start with Ahmed, then PCBS, then Salwa. We speak a lot of confiscation of land in the Jordan Valley area, but the main detriment factor of labor in agriculture is water. In Bardala, there is uncultivated land because of lack of water. In Jift Lake, land is also reduced as a result of shortages in water. A week ago, I was in Bardala. I toured different pieces of land, and it shows how the frequency of access to water, because the Israelis sell them water on informal basis, and the Israelis give them they bulldoze the land and the water pipes. They connect informally to the Israeli grid, and this causes high loss to the farmers, and already agriculture is costly in the Jordan Valley. So the issue of water is a key factor for agriculture in the Jordan Valley, more important than the land itself. And therefore, when we speak of Bardala, and as a result of this adaptation and their access to water through informal sector, if we can call it as such, they were able to develop and reclaim some agricultural land that did not make them need work in the settlements like other areas. But in the Jiftlik, the wells are below their production capacities. They used to output 60 to 70 cubes per hour, and now it's saline water. And even in drought times, they used to rely on Al Far'a Valley, and this led to severe shortage in the quantities of water they have access to. Some farmers purchase water from Per Dajan, but the cost is higher, and this means that the agricultural land is reduced. Also tending to plant dates because it can use saline water. It requires less labor than working in vegetable lands. So this leaves excess of labor that cannot be absorbed by the local market. So the market is not whether the settlement is near or far, but it's about the excess of labor without jobs. So they opt to work in the settlements. Fossil, because it is an area where the population does not own agricultural land, so the brokers The labor brokers who employ the people in the settlements are mainly centered in Fasil. So many of the settlement labor brokers are concentrated in Fasil. And this means these are the detriments that affect the distribution of labor in settlements. It's not how near or far the area is from the settlement, but it is all of these factors. The other point, I don't know if they have presidential exemption of payment of bills. Even under Dr. Salam Fayyad, there were calls to ask all the people across the nation to pay their water and electricity bills. But some people still abstain. Some install off-grid connections before or after the meter, or they use different ways to manipulate the grid and be able to steal electricity. A young man told me yesterday I charged water for 5 years ahead. So I even charged with 50 shekels. Says this is a donation. So they consider this as government contribution to supporting the Jordan Valley area. They view this as a right because there is no direct government intervention in supplying for the needs. Therefore, they believe that this is how they can circumvent the situation and take their rights. I wish to answer the question about the credibility of data. Presented in the papers from PCBS. Here we speak from the census data. And in the census, there are so many control of data and quality of data measures. And the questions of the survey are usually general. We ask about the number of members of household, their place of residency, their refugee head status, their work, matrimonial status. So these are general questions and not personal details, where individuals may not want to answer, or they may want to give you something that is against reality. We do not ask, for example, about their income or personal information. Most of the information is general. On the other hand, in the census, it is a survey of all of the localities, and we can give you rates for this locality, even if the error is very low. The margin of error is very low. The census starts in December. A month later, we take a sample from the households previously visited, let's say 1 or 2% of every locality, and researchers go back to the same locality and ask the same questions to match and compare the accuracy of data collected in the first round of the questions. And usually non-matching of data is very low, and the error margin is very low. So the census data is usually very reliable and credible. In addition to what my colleague has just said, the question of reliability and credibility, we have about 40 surveys implemented annually at BCPS, and we compare data of the census with the separate surveys data. And even in some of the clusters and localities, if there are some suspected questions, we can refer back to the census data and make the comparison even with the data from 2007 or the periodic surveys. The question about the time change and comparison over time, we are now working on a comprehensive paper of all of the localities in Area C, even those that were not covered in this paper presented today, because we have implemented it on the areas totally located in Area C. So we did not make any comparisons. And the next paper will produce all of these comparisons and will do a cross-locality comparison to cover all of these different aspects and indicators that are available to us. A clarifying point about the localities. We said in the beginning of the meeting that we took the definition of different areas according to Oslo. We have classification of area into A, B, and C. We have the localities that are entirely within the boundaries of Area C, whose boundaries are totally located within Area C. So to show you how we identified these areas for our localities, if we take these localities here, we have here the key to the map. We have what area A is and what area B and C. The localities the boundaries here in black, the thin line, are the boundaries of the localities we worked on in the previous census committee, which is a national committee that was formed and had members from governmental and non-governmental organizations and researchers, including Visit University. We demarcated the boundaries of different localities on a geographic section according to the classifications of Oslo. So, for example, we had localities, all of these in light yellow are the classification of what area C is. So we said that the localities that are entirely within this color C, that is boundary to boundary, they are considered as entirely area C areas or localities. And therefore, we compared the data available to us to these localities. Here we have some clusters and localities here in the governorate of Ramallah and Al Biri above the Bedouins of Al Mu'arrajat, which is the road connecting Ramallah to Jericho. These are the localities whose external boundaries are entirely in Area C and they are considered entirely Area C localities. But here we have a locality. This black boundary is the boundary of the locality. Part of this locality is in Area C and another part is in Area B. And therefore, we consider this locality as partly C. And therefore, we did not account for them in this stage, but we are working on these localities. And in the next stage, they will be covered because we will use the data available now, whether the special geographic data, in addition to the census data and any other data. So now we are working on only the data from the census for these localities because we don't have data, official data, issued by PCBS or by any other recognized institution that say that this locality or this rate is for all of the localities in Area C or this for areas that are entirely in Area C. And this is what we will try to present to you. We'll give you data or provide data because the main function of PCBS as an official central statistics bureau is to provide data to researchers, learners, and other users to read in between these data and see the story behind every figure. And therefore, there are so many other indicators that are correlated with this figure, and the function of data analysts or researchers and other users is to read in behind these figures and give us their analysis. And now we have the spatial analysis. Many institutions are working space-wise. That is according to the ship files using the GIS, and they can give us the geographic analysis as well. Thank you.
As for the valleys and why the anemia ratio is high, anemia is deeply rooted there. You look at the data from the UNRWA, usually all the time it is the anemia that's the highest. So we held a study in 2009 and the prevalence of anemia. So it was 44% among the school students in Jericho compared to 2% in Kufr Na'ma and Ramallah area. So from a serious public health issue to better than Europe and Kufr Na'ma. And according to UNRWA statistics, it's always high, the anemia, and it's not related to the intestinal infection. This is not the way. So it's not explained by infection, but it is not. It's not explained. No one knows. She says maybe it's because of the flies. Ibrahim. Israeli studies. I have 3 direct questions. A direct question to our colleagues from the Palestinian Bureau of Statistics. Hopefully, if you had indicators about internal immigration to or from Area C. If you are speaking about resilience and steadfast, and when you compare between the 2007 2017, is this the demographic growth? Is it a natural growth or what? The second question to Mr. Ahmed. In your paper, you speak about popular resilience, and you give 3 models or examples. One of them was directly connected to working in the Israeli settlements. My direct question: what's your understanding of the popular resilience if this is connected to working in the settlements? The third point, since we are speaking about Ms. Salwa, you have an official position and a center under the Ministry of Health. You spoke about this study. But if we want to divide this in the last 25 years between pre and post 2012, do you have policy tendencies or plans towards this area? We cannot keep speaking about government decisions. After 2012, after the disengagement from Oslo and achieving national reality on the ground, do you have plans to consolidate people's steadfastness and not only statistics? Do you have a national plan in your ministry? Thank you. Any other questions? My name is Ahmed Az. Just a comment to Mr. Ahmed. He speaks about forms of resilience and resistance. And he mentioned about taking water from the Israeli pipes. It's a Palestinian water. So I see this as resistance form. He called it as non-official. It's a popular thing. Even if they can take electricity from the Israeli electricity network, call it theft or whatever, I call it resistance. And if I can export our sewage to them, then it's resistance as well. Any other questions? Okay. Start with the PCBS. Your microphone, madam. Yes. Yeah. About immigration, we are conducting a study on the Valley area and the area so-called C area, Area C, and the data will be available soon. As to demographic growth, we publish figures, but the analysis you need other specialists to analyze. The researchers should find the reasons for that. So this could be because of the immigration, or maybe growth will be less. I don't know. Maybe less fertility. There are many reasons. You need someone who specializes in this. At the PCBS, we simply provide statistics, and that's it. Sorry, but the Palestinian National Center. It is not under the Ministry of Health. We are under WHO, but we work with all stakeholders. Sorry, I'm not Ministry of Health. Yes, they have that, but we are in their building, but we are under the WHO. the issue of resilience. People in the Valley area, they have their own approach to see which is better for them. Some of them, they might think that it's better for them to work in the settlements, but call it resilience or what type of resilience. But here also, I see how much this affects the Palestinian identity and physical presence. And so these conditions can be discussed, but for them, it's part of their resilience. Their approaches are different from mine and yours. So they believe this is better for them. As to legality of taking water, no, it's not. Call it resistance. Others who pay for that, and they don't consider this as resistance. The water is taken, someone pays for that. The water they are taking in the resistance that you are calling or non-official, the bills go to the Palestinian Authority that pays for that. So the difference between the meter on the main and the well is a loss, and so it's paid for by the Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority might say, okay, this is not resistance. Even the meters, electricity, prepaid electricity and water, they are handling that and they are doing that. Thank you. This was a great session. I thank the presenters. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
بس بنحب نذكر للي ما سجلش للجولة الميدانية واللي بحب يسجل للجولة الميدانية.
Those who did not register for the field tour, please register your name outside this hall.